So got the compressor back in there. You can see my crow's foot on the end of the spring there. 17 millimeter, 8 millimeter. Going to hold on to the 8 millimeter just to hold it in place. 17. Move it in the counterclockwise direction. We're going to compress that spring and then watch the end of the valve stem come through the hole. And I kind of use the 8 millimeter wrench to aim it and just make sure that it comes through nice and clean. Compressed in the spring. You guys take a look down in there. You can see the end of the valve stem sticking up. You can see those little rings that are on there, those little grooves. Those are for the keepers. The keepers themselves, as I mentioned before, they have a thick side and a thin side. It's kind of angled. And I put a little bit of white lithium grease in there. And the white grease does a couple things. The most important of which is when it goes into those grooves, it kind of acts as just like a really temporary little light hold, almost like a little glue, sticks it in there, and then it squishes out and actually disappears real fast when you can use a Q-tip to wipe it off, or when the oil goes around it. So it dissolves real quick out of there, but it's really useful for getting those on there. One thing these kits usually come with is a tool for placing the keepers on there. And yeah, I've seen a couple of them. I guess they work okay. Me personally, I actually have a way that works a little bit better for me. And what I do is I use a screwdriver with a magnetic tip on it, flathead, and I just place it on the side of the keeper itself. Again, you want the thick end pointing out at you. And you do this. And what that allows you to do is just reach in there and place that right on the side of the keeper, or right on the side of the valve stem. Now, it's magnetic, so you're wondering, is it going to come off? Well, usually the white grease is actually enough of a little bond there to hold it on there. But when it doesn't, I actually just use a Q-tip. Use the Q-tip, press it in place, the grease kind of smears out, forms a little bit of a seal. The Q-tip's not magnetic, so it pulls right off there. I can hold it with the Q-tip and remove the screwdriver. This screwdriver has a really, really light magnetic field, so it actually works really great. Usually I don't even need the Q-tip. So we'll go ahead and put that on. Okay, so go ahead and get our keeper on there. And you place it just like that. You can actually move it off to the side, make it a little bit easier to get the second one on there. The second one will just place right up on top. So you can use the tool if you want to. Me personally, I like a little bit of a very lightly magnetized screwdriver that you can get for $1 or $2. You can get a pack of 5 of them for $3 at the hardware store, and they go on there nice and easy. Okay, quick little snapshot here. Both the keepers are installed. You can see I just wiped that little bit of grease off there. Thick end out towards me. So when I release that spring, it's actually going to move up that cone shape, pinch those keepers together, those grooves on the inside, and hold the spring in place. So the spring has been released. You can see we have the top of the stem itself. We have the top side of the keepers pretty much flush with the top side of that cap on the spring. So next thing we're going to do, turn our ratchet on the front, compress or push the valve down, compress the spring, push the valve down, move the rocker back into place, and move on to the next one. So our spring has been compressed. I used just the end of a screwdriver, push the valve down, pistons in the down position. Doesn't really matter, the keepers are installed, it's not going anywhere. So now we can actually take our rocker arm, just move it back up into position. down below. Gotta remove those. You can see the end of it right there. It actually pushes right onto the end of it. Rocker arm is back on top of the valve stem, and if I look right straight down, I have a clean seating surface between the lobe on the shaft, the lobe on the cam, and the rocker arm itself. If the rocker arm was rotated or tilted in any way, you want to make sure you actually get them to mate up nice and flush. So now I can release the spring pressure, and that's it. That valve stem seal is done. And there's only a couple more left to do before I'm done with this project. Alright, so found something interesting while I was doing the valve stem seals. Lowers went real easy, or the exhaust. I'm doing the intakes, so I'm up here and using the longer compression tool, going down in there. Something that I found, one of the videos that I saw out there, I'm not going to recreate the entire video. It's already been a couple of good ones done by AGA and by a couple of tool rental places. It's something that I found that was pretty helpful. The videos were talking about the spring over here on the side. And what it does, it goes down, and there's one end of the spring that ties into the actual aluminum block, or aluminum head. There's another end that goes down, and it fits inside of a V down in there. And the end of it is not crimped in any way or bent, so it can slip out of there. So, like the video said, I saw it happen once on one of my early valves. And what I realized was, while I was in there removing the spring and the cap and the keepers, that I was actually kind of bumping that extra little extension piece, which runs here all the way down to where it mounts onto the block down there. So it's just free floating. It's kind of pinched in between the rocker arm, and I was bumping that, and that's what actually caused it to fall out. So once I started going a lot slower with my turns in my wrenches, once I started making sure that I didn't bump that extra extension piece, hadn't had it happen again. So just kind of a good tip that I thought I'd share. Be careful when you're taking that out, and make your wrench turns nice and slow. And I've done the rest of the engine, the rest of the intakes, and never had a problem. So one thing just to note as I'm doing these intake valves, the stem seals on them, saw videos out there. I don't want to recreate everything. You know, AGA put out a great video for their tool. A couple of the tool rental places have done in-depth stuff. So the only thing that I really wanted to point out is some of those videos show a spring. Obviously we're compressing the valve spring, but also that spring right up above it. It's just one single wire that hangs down there coming off the end of the spring. It's not crimped, it's not bent, nothing to really lock it in place. And some of the videos actually show where those springs can come off, and I had it happen once. And what I noticed was, number one, I wasn't being careful, and I actually, when I was moving the rocker arm, I actually bumped that part. This is basically just an extension piece that runs from here down to your rocker arm and mates up with it. So I bumped that. That very well may have been what caused it. I was real careful with everything else all the way through. Didn't really have another instance. But what I just actually thought of, when I was rotating the engine around, the other thing that happened is when it came out, I thought I had just touched it, but when it came out, the lobe on the cam was actually rotating around. So what I'm wondering is if when I did it, if that lobe was in the position, because if you rotate it around, just keep going around with the engine, the piston does come up to top dead center at different times. What I'm wondering is if that lobe was actually hitting in that transition piece, and maybe just that shift in pressure also pushed it out. So what I did on the last valves is I made sure, as it was rotating around, the lobe was actually pointing away as much as possible. And again, haven't really had that problem since. So just one extra side note that might help.